Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Great to be with you. Don't you love being in person? To all of our virtual people out there, I want to say hello. Glad you're able to join us. But boy, do I love being in person and having people. I don't know about you, but I really miss that. I have a high need for affiliation and affinity, and a video doesn't always do that for me. So happy to be with you, and even better when it's a great day outside and I can burn up the Turner Turnpike getting here from my hometown of Tulsa. So can I just, before I start, just say thank you to, of course, Mary Lytle, who's the hostess with the mostest. Thank you, Mary. You're amazing. You're like a hype man. I need to have you at every one of the times that I speak because your energy is contagious. I also want to thank Travis Jones and Lynn Flynn, two of my very close friends who approached me at the end of last year and said, hey, we are needing a topic, like what's happening? And I just said, I'm spending a lot of time helping people to build virtual trust. And they were like, that's it. And so I am going to talk about that today, but before I do, I want to tell you about the amazing trust and the incredible team that I have, and they happen to be with me today. These are two members of my team, Kathy Ortel and, of course, Carrie Shelton. Thank you all so much for being here to support me. I really appreciate that. So as we kind of get started, I want to kind of preface this and let you know. Let me do a quick test of our slides here. Perfect. So on the back of your program, of course, we've got great learning objectives. As a former trainer, that's near and dear to my heart that we have learning objectives. So in the course of 50 minutes, I'm going to do my darndest to try to cover every one of these points. But if I don't and you still need more information, I have my contact information on a slide. Please feel free to contact me. I'm very happy to answer any questions. So basically, let me tell you what we're going to cover today. Our agenda, I'm a guy that thinks simple, the more simple, the better. And so I have really three things that I really want to cover in my agenda. What, so what, and now what? And by the way, you can borrow that, you can steal it. Very simple, but I always just try to think of topics and audiences that I talk to, and I think, what are the things that they most want to know? So what I want to do is I want to frame up what is virtual trust. Like if you haven't defined that, I want to talk to you about it, give you some of my own experience. We're going to also talk about, so what does that mean? Like, okay, virtual trust, I get it, but what's the big deal? I'm going to talk about the relevance of that in our current work environment. And then thirdly, I'm going to take some time and just give you some practical applications of what I have learned, what we have learned in working with our clients. And so you've got two things at your tables, and then those of you that are virtually, hopefully if you don't have copies of these, we'll get these to you at the end of our program today. But basically, you've got a half card, so I want to invite you to get that. We're going to kind of use that. Again, the trainer in me is like, everybody needs a takeaway. You need a job aid, so that's how my brain works. So that's there, and then I'm going to tell you about the other handout I've given you called You Are the Message. I'll talk about that at the end as we go in. Okay, are we ready? Let's go ahead and jump into our topic then and talk about this today, and let's kind of lead off with the what and the why. So I'm a big person for narrative and story, and I'm a big believer that story and storytelling is a very powerful thing that we use. I'm pleased to see Wendy Thomas and Marnie Taylor, two people I hold in very high esteem, getting ready to speak to you. Wendy and I have both shared this idea that narrative and story is really how we lead. And we have talked a lot about the actual chemical. It's called oxytocin. Oxytocin is elevated or decreased depending on story. Oxytocin is basically what gives us emotion and tells us what we need to do. Great attorneys appeal to juries' oxytocin through stories, right? And so narrative becomes very important, and you're going to hear me talk about narrative as a part of how you build virtual trust. So let me kind of begin with my personal narrative, my leadership narrative. So I have been fortunate enough ever since I was at the University of Oklahoma to be in leadership roles. I have not shied from those. I've been kind of called to be a leader and to serve in different capacities. I was reminded, I just met Kirk, and Kirk works with one of my dear friends from college all the way through up. And I learned a lot about leadership at the University of Oklahoma. Don't worry, I have 2 children that are pokes, so just to clear the air, no booing or hissing, I am contributing to the wonderful town of Stillwater as we speak. So one of the things that I have learned, and Carrie mentioned to you one of the roles that I've served in, my real formation after OU, I worked at Tulsa Community College. Lee Goodson, who's the president there, amazing, an incredibly ethical leader. And then I had the great privilege to work after TCC. I got to work at a place called First Data. First Data, I learned a lot of things, a third-party processor. I left First Data and I went to work for probably one of the greatest companies that I think exists today, and that is Williams. I owe a great deal to my time at Williams and the experiences that I gained there, especially when it comes to culture. Our CEO at the time, Keith Bailey, when I was there, was such a huge proponent of culture that everything that we did really relied on those 10 pieces. So when Danielle was giving her introduction, I was like, oh my gosh, like, you are amazing. Because here's the thing, we want to align what we do, our personal values, to corporate values. And I don't know if you could really hear it in Danielle's talk, but you can hear that. Integrity matters to her. It's something that Devin does as well. And so there's alignment there. The reason I bring all of this up is because, I learned at a very early age that trust is an important aspect of any system, any organizational system, any culture. And trust is not easy to gain. It is incredibly hard to regain when it's lost. And in those first years that I was at the Williams companies, and I got to serve with leaders all over the enterprise, I really learned that in order to receive trust, you have to give trust. You with me there? In order to get trust, you have to give trust. And so I really saw that happening. And from that point at Williams, I went out on my own, did some personal consulting. I then had the great fortune of working for Kathy Taylor, who was the mayor of the city of Tulsa. And boy, let me tell you, if anybody has ever served in public office, I will no longer be an armchair quarterback. I will not read the paper. I will not create my own assumptions. When you serve in that capacity, you really learn a lot of hard lessons. You learn a lot, even more about leadership. And I just tell you all of that to say that I have been fortunate at Hogan Taylor, who is a big partner with you in the work that the Oklahoma Ethics Consortium does. We have been able to really think about and look at culture, and especially through the pandemic, apply some principles and ideas that I hope to share with you today as a part of my talk. So I have to just tell you, in my days at Williams, so I would have been there 99 to 2003, I remember when the big thing was virtual teams, and virtual meaning that these were people across the country, across the globe, and you had to learn how to lead virtual teams. Did we have any idea about how that would change? In February of 2020, it all really became clear that we had to adapt and we had to do things in a different way. So I'm going to use a part of that leadership narrative to really set the tone for what trust is. So let me talk to you a little bit about this. If you don't own any of Simon Sinek's stuff, I don't want to make a plug, but he really has some amazing ideas. And he talks a lot about, in his first book, it says Start With Why. He talks a lot about creating safe environments, places where people can be themselves, where we can build trust and know that, oh my gosh, you're a person just like I'm a person. You're going to make mistakes just like I'm going to make mistakes. And so he talks a lot about this, and so I have on the slide here, I'm going to read it aloud. Please read it with me as I read it aloud. It says, trust is a feeling, not an instruction. It emerges from safe environments. Here are key words, and I'm going to see if you've seen this ever. Cynicism, paranoia, mistrust, and self-interest emerge in unsafe environments. Why is that, right? Why does that occur? And now let's apply that to a virtual workplace, right? Where I may not actually be in people's presence. I only get a moment through a video to really understand, or a chat, or a instant message, right? To kind of understand or know what it is that you're about, what it is that you mean. And so now the stakes are really high. What I remember from my days at Williams, and this really does come into play here, and that is values are caught, not taught. If you have a pen or something, I want you to write that down, because this is really important, especially when it comes to ethical behavior, intended behavior. Values are caught, not taught. So if you're like me and my brain hums when you hear alliterations, hopefully that will help you. That's a little memory hook for me. So values are caught, not taught. What does that mean? Basically, that people are going to catch, right? They're going to see and make decisions based on what they see, what they experience, the stimulus that they interpret that tells them whether or not they want to trust, they want to move forward with you. And so, given that, I think Stephen Covey says it very well when he says that trust is the highest form of motivation. Think about that for a minute. Trust is the highest form of motivation. And it's so. Because the more I trust you, the more willing I'm going to be to do what you ask me to do. Or the more I trust you, the more I am going to understand, be available, and feel that two-way street of trust so that we can work together more effectively. This is very, very important. A big concept that you've probably read about or seen is this idea of psychological safety at work. Some of you are like, okay, that's a little woo-woo, and it sounds a little woo-woo, and I get it, but it's real. Psychological safety, basically, just easily defined, is feeling comfortable bringing up disagreements, changes in process, just being authentic in the workplace. And in some workplaces, we don't feel that way. And guess what? Now, when people don't feel that sense of psychological safety, it is an employee's market out there. And I can make a change very quickly, right? So all of this, I hope you can see, like the definition, the reasons why we need to understand this is very important. Now, at the University of Oklahoma, I got a BA in psychology, and one of the very first lessons I learned was Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Just show of hands in person, and if you're online, go ahead and do this. You can feel a part of it, but show of hands, how many of you have seen this before, just in the room? Yeah, large amounts of people. So let me tell you basically what this means. So Abraham Maslow said that really everybody wants to be their very best, right? If you have any doubts about this, just think about ads like for the armed services, right? Army, you're an army of one. Be all that you can be. Wow, that's where I want to go. I want to be there, right? Or be the few, the proud, the Marines, aim high, right? These messages speak to us because we want to be the very best that we can be. But here's the thing that we have to remember. He said that like a triangle in foundational principles that build up to being the very best you can be, he says that we really have to make sure that people have their psychological needs and their basic needs met. Now I want to take you back. It's March, it's April 2020. We're all at home. We're trying to figure out how to make this remote thing work. Or we are in mission critical, or forgive me, I've lost the term in my head, but I have to go to work. I can't be at home. I can't, or my company doesn't have the technology for me to be able to be at home. So one of the primary things you're worried about is what? Am I safe? Am I going to get sick? I've ordered everything from Amazon. Now I'm worried that the Amazon boxes have the virus on them. Can I really open the boxes? Do I need to spray disinfectant on the boxes, right? We just did some crazy stuff because we were afraid and we didn't know. So imagine that sense of fear and in foreboding, and you're by yourself in your home office or with your family, or thankfully did not have to go through this. You're wrangling your 4, 5, 8, 12-year-olds and making sure they go to school, they finish their assignments. It was a really impactful time. We're coming out of that, but there are so many things that we learned from that. I just encourage you, if you are thinking about how you motivate the people that work around you, I would revisit this. I do this all the time. If I can't make sure that those 4 areas are taken care of, I will not be able to really help someone be all that they can be. So safety needs first, and then what you find is that belongingness and love and esteem needs have to be there. Trust. I feel comfortable. I like the people that I work with here. I feel like my leader has my back, right? So those things have to be in place before people can be all that they can be. So keeping that in mind, let me tell you what this really looks like from a work standpoint. In order for us to build trust, what we have to really acknowledge is that most employees are eager to do well, to please their leaders, and to achieve as high a position as they can within the company. Would you agree with me? Yeah. Nobody wakes up and says, how can I do a half-assed job today? How can I really get around everything that I'm doing? Or how can I wake up and be really lazy? Human beings don't do that. What we do as human beings is we make assumptions based on activities and go, oh, Melanie is so lazy. She's just not going to work out, right? And I do that without really doing that. So we use a term with our clients, and we try to use it on our team, and that is assume positive intent. Have you heard that before? Assume positive intent. Rather than going to the dark place, what's the light place? Why could this be happening? Things like that are how we begin to build trust and allow other people to feel led by us, okay? So the application of this really goes back to this idea that I talked about, which is, trust is a two-way street. As I worked at Williams and other companies who invested a great deal in leadership development, I also learned that from a needs standpoint, employees have personal needs and they have practical needs. And those of you that are watching online and can see here, you can see some of what they want. And so when employees are asked, they really say that, I have personal needs and I have practical needs. Look at the personal needs. The bottom line is to be valued, understood, involved, and supported. Trusted, right? And even goes even further specifically, feel good about themselves, understand the what and why behind what they do, to be asked to be a part of things, trusted, and given responsibility. But there's also some very practical needs, so I just need clarity. What is it exactly I need to do? I need a good amount of time, like what is reasonable. I need options, so choices. I need to make sure that we're in agreement so that you and I are one. And then I just need a method for following up. I need to feel like, I'm good on what you're doing, and I understand what it is that you're asking me to do. I think the other thing that has to be in place in our workplaces is emotional intelligence. And you've probably seen this before, emotional quotient, emotional intelligence. This is a very, very important part. I think of it in 5 ways. The ability to be self-aware, to be able to to know, like when you walk in a room, like how do you affect the room? Does the oxygen go out of the room? Do people get tense? Like whatever. Also, when you walk in a room and you see people or you're upset or what have you, how are you regulating that? How are you making sure that you can be authentic but not blowing up and, shouting obscenities and, things that really are career-limiting moves, let's face it, right? We don't want to do that. The third thing is really the motivation, like what motivates you, understanding the kinds of things that make you happy, really drive you. Also, the opposite, what really takes the wind out of your sails? What are the things that hey, I really shouldn't do that because it really takes the wind out of my sails? Like for me, I am not the best at administration. I will just say it. Carrie, say nothing. I am terrible at administration. I love to delegate that. Administration for me is like, and I hope I'll be invited back. I'm not an Excel spreadsheet. Please don't hate me. I man, I struggle. Like, I can do the basics, but that kind of stuff, like, that doesn't motivate me. But talking about things that help people feel better about themselves, this is what motivates me. You know what I'm talking about? Like, we've got to really figure out what that is, and even more so, we have to know what that is for our employees. We have to take time to know what it is. The other thing that really comes to this is also empathy. And I don't know if you know the difference between like empathy and sympathy. Sympathy is, oh my gosh, I've been through that, right? Empathy is, I can imagine that probably feels pretty bad. Like if I were in your shoes, that would feel really bad. We have to show empathy, and then finally, just good social skills, like what's appropriate, what's not appropriate in a group of people, right? And so the more that we can do this, the more that we can practice these skills, people begin to see us as someone that they can be led by or be in a group with. So I hope you're kind of seeing this is what trust is. This is what it looks like. This is a part of what happens. Now let me go to the relevant part today. So what? So why does this really matter for purposes of discussion or purposes of how it relates to the world of work? So I got to tell you, as a person that has a high need for affinity and affiliation, like in person, and also a psychologist at heart, my brain started spinning when I was like, okay, we are all at home. There are certain positions where people have to go to work and don't have a choice. What is that doing to us as a society? Like, what is going to be that impact? And as a former consultant, I'll just be honest with the room. When we started shutting down, I thought, wow, how updated is my resume? Like how I'm in an area of practice that I don't think a lot of people are going to buy that work. So, what am I going to do? Like, what's the next step? And so I was thinking about all these things. And thankfully, Hogan Taylor positioned itself during this time where people were applying for PPP. Also, we helped organizations really interpret the federally mandated employee programs, so the extended FMLA, and some of those other things that were really great benefits for employees. But I gotta say, I was still just kind of in awe and wondering what will be the impact to society. I don't think we'll know that for five, maybe 10 years, and we'll look back on it. But let me tell you some of what I found. So I'm a big guy for Gallup. I love Gallup polls. I love Gallup information. I also love a group called the OWL Group, so they do OWL studies. Let me tell you, I just always think statistics are interesting, and I want to share some of the ones that really jump out at me as I think about so what, like trust, virtual trust, so what does it matter? In the United States labor force, we had approximately 165 million people working in February of 2020, okay? In 2022, more than 4.7 million people reported working remotely at least half the time for organizations. I don't know about many of you, but we have a hybrid model, meaning that our employees work from home. We have times that we're in the office, we try to time that, but everybody has their own method. And one of the things that I have learned is that there are great positives. There are also risks with that when you're in that. But hey, whatever works for you, works for you. Here's the other thing. This is what I found to be really fascinating. I thought, man, this must be really tough. 44% of companies that were surveyed do not allow remote work. It's less than half, a little bit less than half, but still, like, wow. That, in the world that I'm in, and I don't know about you, I thought a lot of people are figuring out remote. Like, to me, I thought that it'd be a much lower number, but to me, it tells me that there are still organizations, and we notice organizations who did hybrid work are now going back to full-time in the office, so we see that happening as well. Globally, 16% of companies are fully remote, which is really interesting. I think a lot of our European counterparts, they are completely remote. So they are in a world where they may not see their fellow employees for weeks, months, a year until they get together. And then about 62% of workers aged 22 to 65 claim to work remotely at least occasionally. So, a lot of people are at home. We can't see their butts in seats. We have to be able to trust that they are getting things done, that they are reporting to us. We are having to give trust to get trust. Let me give you a couple more. There is an economic impact. I don't know if you all thought about this, but on the average, remote employees are saving 40 minutes daily in their commute. 40 minutes, okay? Since 2020, meeting by video calls have increased by 50%. That's no shock, right? By the way, just really quick tangent. I don't remember a time where I actually had more than like 3 or 4 in-person meetings in a day. Do you know what my average is on video calls now? 7 to 8. Because it's 30 minutes, like, right? So now my question is, where's the margin for performance for us? Like, where is your rest coming? Here are a couple more. Close to 70% of full-time workers are at home. 23% would take a 10% cut to work from home permanently. They save on average $500 a month, resulting in savings close to $6,000 per year. And now more than half, 60% almost, said they would likely choose an employer who offered remote work. So a couple of things that I will just tell you, observations from that right there. It is an economic benefit for people to be working from home. To be working remote. It's not only a benefit, but there are ways and things that they can now do that they were not able to do now that they are at home. There is a more of a flexibility. But as you can imagine, there are distractions when you're at home. There are moments that you may not be as productive as you would be if you were in the office. There's a delineation there. We're still looking at that, trying to discover, are we really getting a full 8 hours on average from people when they are at home? Many of you would say, you're getting actually 10 because I'm there right now. Like, my day used to be 8 to 5. My day is now like 7 to 7. And I'm getting and giving even more because I am at home. It's more flexible. So there are some gives and takes. Let me tell you what this is doing. This is having a profound effect on engagement, and let me tell you why. Gallup did a study, and 48% of America's working population is actively job searching or watching for opportunities. I want to ask a rhetorical question. What is driving the desire for new job opportunities? Is it trust related? Is it the fact that now I'm getting a ton of email from recruiters? Is it now that in the spare time that I had at home, I was updating my LinkedIn profile or I was contacting my network? Could it be any of those things? But it's happening at an alarming rate. The lost productivity of not engaged and actively disengaged employees equal to 18% of their annual salary. That was huge for me. For a company of 10,000 employees with an average salary of $50,000 each, disengagement costs about $60.3 million a year. This is the one that we find most of our clients really dealing with. Replacing workers requires 1/2 to 2 times the employee's annual salary. So it costs $9,000 a year to keep each disengaged worker and between $25,000 to $100,000 to replace them. The biggest thing that I notice is that the ROI has changed. You know, we do an ROI all the time, telling us, should I do this, should I not do this? Is this worth my time, is this not worth my time? I'm gauging it, right? The rules have changed. Now I'm wondering, well, if I get out, if I do this, is it really worth it? Or can I just get it all done here, right? Or if I'm being asked to go in, what am I being asked to go in to do, right? What is my return on investment? So the result is that there is a great reassessment of work and what makes a team or individuals engaged. So on your half card, I have a little, on one side, you'll see the information that we have here To me, in my career, I have really found that 9 things have to be in place, and you can follow along with me. I invite you to take notes if you would like, because I think that's a way that we can kind of remember and capture information. Number 1, and I want you to write in this word, if you would, it says be open and honest. Let's face it, it's about being vulnerable. Write it down. In the world I grew up in, especially in the late 90s and early 2000s, it was not about sharing what was going on in your life. A leader was expected to be perfect, to have absolutely no issues, and you always checked your stuff outside of work at the door when you walked into work. And it has changed dramatically. You'll hear Brene Brown. You'll hear people like Patrick Lencioni. Vulnerability is the key in creating trust with teams. The reason it's the key is because at the end of the day, I want to work with people who make me think of me, that I can relate to. The more I can relate to you, the more connection I feel to you, the more likely it's going to be that I can trust you. Number 2, you have to really own your mistakes. You have to claim them. You have to say, I made a mistake, I was wrong, let's try to fix this, so on and so forth. It is definitely not about blaming others. Even if you didn't do something right, you have to take responsibility for fixing it. That's what trust really means. Number 3, you have to be able to share your leadership or personal narrative. If you don't have that, if you don't know or can't speak to your experience in 1 to 2 minutes, I encourage you to build that. I encourage you to build that and to share it with people as much as you can. I was listening to Danielle doing the principle, and I was like, gosh, Danielle's got a great leadership narrative there. Like, she's starting on that. She's talking about her experience, because story is how we communicate. It elicits oxytocin that gives people good or bad feelings. So what is that leadership personal narrative? Think about that. Number 4, remember that everyone is a real person just like you. And my mom just turned 81 this year, and I will never forget this kind of sagey advice she would give me when I would try to compare myself to people and say, oh, I can't do it, I'm not like them, they're a person just like you. There is nothing else that people have that you don't already have, and you have to believe that. If you don't believe that, then everybody else is going to be out of reach. So knowing that every person is just like you, that could be feeling the same way as you are, reach out. That builds trust. Number 5, listening is an underrated skill, probably now more than ever. These wonderful little bits of technology that we have in our watches and our phones, we could be in a really important conversation, be fully present. That little thing hits, we're like Pavlov's dogs, right? We're like, oh, what is it? And I've lost this connection to the person I'm talking to. Or I get a text, or I happen to have it open, or I can't help it, I'm just programmed to keep checking my phone. Those distractions keep us from listening. And especially if we're virtual, we have to set expectations. You're going to hear me talk about this, about what we expect on video calls. I expect your camera to be on. I expect you to actually be engaged in the conversation. If you can't be, then you probably shouldn't be here, because camera off tells me you're not engaged. I'm sorry, those are the rules. Now you can listen, and it's okay to say, hey, I'm going to listen. I have to do this thing right now, but I'll be listening, I'm driving, whatever. That's okay. But you need to have people really engaging so they are listening as well. Getting rid of our distractions, I just talked about that. And then number 7, just be intentional in your activities. Intentionality has become a very important thing, and a lot of times we don't do stuff because we're like, when I celebrate people or when I do something, it should be spontaneous, right? That makes it more real. In reality, what I have to do now is I have to plan for those moments. Like if I want to recognize Mary for something that she's doing, I need to make sure that I'm intentional about it. If I want to set up a team meeting, I have to be intentional about it. I have to create an agenda. I have to have some guidance of what we're going to go over. I have to be intentional in what I do. Number 8, Always, always know your constituents and stakeholders. Always know who your audiences are. Who are the people in your audience? Your audience could be close to 50 people here, 100 people online for me, or it could be 1 to 2 people in a conference room. Who is the audience? How are you engaging with them? Who's the audience online? How are you engaging with them? And just finally, think about how and what you communicate. As cheesy as it sounds, you really are the message. Like, I could have really great slides up here, and this would be awesome, but let's face it, you're listening to me. You're intent on hearing what I'm here to tell you. This is just window dressing. If this went away, I could still speak and I could still be a person that engaged with you. You're the message. No matter where you serve, whether you're in a formal or informal leadership capacity, people are watching what you do, okay? So, that's Trust 101. Just want to make sure that you see that and you know that's there. Let me talk to you about how we make this practical. And I'm sorry, I'm just checking my watch just to make sure I'm on time. Let's talk about the application of these ideas with some very practical steps. So on the back of your half card, if you want to turn that over, you're going to notice several questions. And these questions are really designed to be just ticklers, if you will, for having you to check, am I building virtual trust? So let me tell you how we're going to do that. I'm going to share 10 practical ways that you can be doing more of this. I'm going to give you some specific examples, so feel free to write those down, take notes. I'll also have my contact information, and then we've got little note cards. If you want to ask questions on any of those items, feel free to fill out a question, and I'll answer those up here. So, back of your card, you've got those questions. Let me talk to you about what we're looking at here. One of the key aspects of any relationship is to know what people expect of you. And quite often, and I know my fellow HR professionals, quite often we're asked to come in and people are talking about poor performance, and this person isn't doing this, they aren't doing this, they aren't doing this, and our first question is, do they know what you expect? Have you had a conversation? Oh, no, I just assumed. I mean, they promoted you into that role. I mean, that's what Jimmy did before them. It's like, so they have no idea how you feel right now. No, they don't. Okay, so first and foremost, in building virtual trust, we want to set very clear expectations. This is guidelines for what you expect them to do and boundaries of what you expect them to do, including things like, hey, I'd really like for you not to work past 6 if you can help it. Like for you to get all your work done here. Or, I know you'll have to work late over a couple of nights, but let's not make that a habit. This is my expectation, right? If you are going to be working remote, we have Teams. I'd like for you to have that up and be able to be accessed at any time, right? I can see your little light, so on and so forth. And I want to make sure you know, and my team knows this, I am not watching for the light. Like, I'm not watching going, oh, it's yellow. Kathy's out. Why is she out right now? It's 1 o'clock in the afternoon. She should be in, right? I don't do that. But what I do is I say to people, hey, we can, if you need to do something and you still need to be accessible, you can download that on your phone. It's up to you. But you can still be accessible. Gang, we do not talk to people enough about what we expect. We just don't. And especially when they transition into new positions or into new responsibilities, I have to be really clear and directive with them. Ken Blanchard, years ago, that's one of the leadership curriculums I was certified in situational leadership. One of the very first things he says is you have to be very directive on what you expect people to do. You have to line it out. We can't make assumptions. So make sure you set clear expectations, go over them all the time. The second is to be like water. It's not just enough to be adaptive. You have to be fluid. Like things can change in a moment. We have to be able to move appropriately when things change in a moment. So you know what the key is, and I want you to write this down. We have to be organized. You cannot live in chaos and be able to pivot in a moment. You have to be organized, which means your files have to be organized online. You have to know where your work papers are. You have to be able to access that information. You can't be adaptive and flexible unless you know where things are and what you need to do, right? So that's the second thing. I think it is extremely important that we have concrete plans, but they have to be flexible. They have to be able to be changed. The third thing that you see here is I have this idea of adapt, adopt, or reject. And here's what we know that happens is we have an expectation or we have a vision of what work might look like. And many times what I think work is going to look like is not what Mary is going to think work is going to look like. We are having two different ideas. So what we have to do is work together and say, well, let's adapt what we're doing. Or we've never done this before. Let's adopt it and put it into what we're doing. Or you know what? That's not going to work. Let's just not do that anymore. Right? That's too hard for us to do. Let's make a change and let's not do that anymore. So I want you to know that in anything, you can either choose to adapt, adopt, or reject. The other thing that I recommend that people do is, especially in building virtual trust, is to increase the cadence, the number of check-ins that you have. I do think there is such a thing as overdoing meetings. I'll be the first to say that. But I do think that often you have to check in. This is just me. This is what I recommend. On a bi-weekly basis, my team and I, we do a team huddle. And in that team huddle, we basically go through some guidelines, and you're welcome to use this. What we do is we talk about what we accomplished in the past week. So each person does this, 3 things. 3 things I accomplished in the past week. 3 things that I'm going to be focused on this week. We also talk about things that are happening to us personally, professionally, right? And then what are some tasks or things that are still needed to be done that we haven't quite gotten to yet? That's a big one, because what I want my team to be able to do is to say, hey, I'm behind. I know you need it, but I'm behind on it. I'm going to get it done. Here's when I'm going to get it done. Simple things like that and putting it out there and people just expect to fill that out creates a cadence. And now you have, as a leader, a check-in so you know exactly where people are. Carrie has a person who is her equivalent in Tulsa. She's online with us today, Katrina Dugan. Katrina and Carrie and I have a check-in on a weekly basis. We check in for 30 minutes. This 30 minutes is just time for us. We can cover anything. Nothing is off base. We can talk about personal stuff. We can talk about professional stuff. Something's on their mind. When they know that they have this time, they can trust that that's going to be our time. It's not going to be something that we share. If I need it, I'm going to call ahead and say, hey, do you mind if we punt? Because I've got this thing. It's just come up, whatever. But we're getting that time in. In a virtual world, we have to create pockets and moments where we can connect. And even better if we can do it in person. And then just finally, here's the big thing, communication. Chats. How many of you use Teams today? Is that kind of the primary platform? I have to tell you this. I hope Steve Perkins is on this call. He's our IT guy. When we rolled that out, and I swear to you, we rolled it out in December of 19, I gave him the biggest eye roll I've ever did. I was like, another application, really? We have so many of these. What are we going to do with this new application? Like, really? We've got all these other things that we can do where we can do video calls. And man, were we ready and able to pivot when this came and all the video calls. So emails, texts, chat. I think texts are big, actually, because we all have phones now. There's not a person, maybe, if you're here, please give me your secret. We all have iPhones, Samsungs, whatever. So now we can be reached. So texts are a great way to get a hold of people. The bottom line is this. Ask employees how they best like to be communicated with. I do that all the time. Like, hey, can I text you? Are you going to be online? Can I send you an email? Hey, can I? We have to ask. And again, getting expectations. This is what I expect. I'm going to be reaching out to you. I'm going to be doing these things. Okay? So those are our first 5 practical steps, some things that you can do to make sure that you are managing virtually. Let me take you through the next 5. I'm a big person for celebrating. I think it is extremely important for people to be honored, to be celebrated, but here's what I want you to put next to celebrate often. Would you put the letters Y-D-O? Y, D, and O. As in yes, dog, oval. I don't know, just pulled that out. Y-D-O. Orange is the better O. Yep. So let me tell you what you do. When you celebrate, you make sure that people understand the impact they've had on you, the department or group, and the organization. We call that impact YDO. It's I can always give a high five. Hey, great job, way to go, woo! But people have to see what they've done and understand the impact to you, the department, and the organization overall. And if I can align them to great values like Devin has, which is integrity, and connect them to that, even better. Because I want people to continue those things. In the same way, if it's a developmental opportunity, I can really talk about impact YDO too from a developmental lens. Here's what that has caused us. Here's what this has caused me. Here's what this is causing our department, and overall, this might be the impact of the organization. Like, I need to anchor them to something in that way. So celebrating is big. I'm going to spend just a little bit of time talking more about that in just a moment, but I think it's also really fun to celebrate virtually and take time to honor accomplishments. Because now in today's world, a little emoticon or a thumbs up or whatever, that's how we feel appreciation, and it can work for you. Let me talk about listening. I said it in our first things. I have a listening day that I do on a weekly basis, and that sounds like we're in kindergarten, and it sounds like something your teacher would say, okay, we're having a listening day today, but it works. On that day, my primary focus is to listen. It is not to talk, it is to listen. And as somebody who's in a leadership role, it is a really tough day for me. And someone who likes to talk, it's hard. But what I find on those days is I learn things that I would not have learned before because I'm more silent. I'm listening to people. Listening is one of those skills that we take for granted. Again, with our distractions, we don't think about it. But I just want to encourage you, create a listening day and just make it your time to really listen to what people are saying. The other thing that you can do to listen, I've seen a lot of pop-up surveys that occur. Some organizations that we work with actually use a Net Promoter Score as an employee satisfaction tool. So if that's something that you want to do, happy to talk with you about how you do that. But it's just a way that you can really listen. What are people appreciating? What do they need? How do we modify what we do? Probably now more than ever, we want to keep asking that. Number 8, connect and be accessible. One of the things I really appreciated during the pandemic, our CEO, Randy Nail, did a video every week. So every Monday we would have a video published, and in Randy's own way, he connected and related what he was feeling to what we were doing as a firm, and it was extremely powerful. Then my leader, the next in line under him, the guy I report to, actually did one as well. His was shorter, and it was usually, I got to tell you, my boss Robert is not a guy that's like this. He's a great speaker. He has a very different style than me, but what was cool is he would actually have it at different places from his house. And he would always talk about things that he was doing to help him focus. Because a lot of people, again, it was a really scary time. He was sharing things that he did, and it was extremely powerful. I felt very connected to him. Then, as time went on, he would just meet people for breakfast. As a matter of fact, today, he's in Little Rock, and this morning, he met people for breakfast who work in our Little Rock office, because connecting and being accessible is extremely important. My one-on-ones that I do with my team, it's so critical for them to see me, to talk to me, and to know that I'm accessible to them. The last two are pretty simple. Share documents and information. Need to provide a way for people to collaborate, to get together, to talk, share ideas. My team does something kind of cool. At the end of every Friday, they have desk time. I think it's called something else. Cube time. And it's really, they just get online together and they just catch up. Like they just have their cameras on, they're working, it's kind of like small talk, like they were together in person, and so they just small talk or they cover lots of things. It's incredible, keeps them together. And then just finally, I wish I could always say that I'm so good at practicing everything I preach, but I'm not. These are probably great reminders for me that I need to keep doing. So, to teach is to learn twice, so this is probably really good for me to keep reminding myself. Quite often, I will give someone an assignment, but then I will think, well, I need to tell them exactly how to do it. And if I don't delegate authority to them, I usually have to be in there. I want you to make sure, and this is a word I want you to put down in number 10, make sure that you're delegating to people and letting them chart their own path. Getting from point A to point B on their own. It's tough because, micromanagers, we have gotten into roles as leaders because we are high performers. We have great technical skill, but sometimes it's really tough for us to give that up and to delegate. And I have found it to be so freeing to just say, here, take it. Tell me what you would do with it. You do the next thing, so on and so forth. So it can be really, really good. So those are the 10 things. Those are the really practical steps. Since I've got just a little bit more time, really quickly, I want to just cover a little bit about employee recognition and just give you a couple of things to keep in mind. Now, more than ever, employees need to be recognized, but I want to use a phrase from a fellow consultant, Jen Wilson from a company called Convergence Coaching. She coined this, or maybe her team did, and I use it all the time. You always hear one size fits all. She is very fond of saying one size fits one. And I've glommed onto that, and I think about that anytime that I'm recognizing people and thinking that everybody loves to be on stage and to have people clap for them. No, they don't. Lynn Flynn definitely does not like that. But if you want to recognize with a note, small gift card, a coffee, just a word of thanks, whatever it is that people need, I want you to really think about what it is that they need and want and provide it. And I'm going to give you a couple of things that'll hopefully help you think about this and remember it. I use this acronym of GIFT when I think about how I recognize other people, because it is not always about things. It's not always about actual extrinsic stuff that people get. Some of it can be very intrinsic, can be very personal. One of the very first things that you can give as a gift is an opportunity for growth or a stretch assignment. High performers, if you want to make sure you have trust, give them additional assignments that help them to stretch. The G in gift. The I says helping other people improve. When you take a moment to say, hey, you're doing this great, I want to help you improve on it. Can we take some time to do that? I'm giving you time. That could be a way to really help other people to recognize their efforts. Also giving them focus. So I'm going to kind of move some of these other things out of the way. I want you to really focus on this. I think you do a great job here. Let's see what you could do if you had even more time, energy, right? So I'm going to take those things out of the way. I'm going to let you really tee off on that here. And then just finally saying thanks for a job well done, and in using the impact of IDEO if you do it as a part of that. The other thing that we spend a great deal of time on with organizations, and I know you've seen this, so this is not anything new at all, but The Advantage is a book by Patrick Lencioni. It's one of the items that we used when we created HT3. Those are our 3 core values: unity, service, dynamic. At Hogan Taylor, we actually asked ourselves these questions, and it helped us to hone in on what it is that we were doing. These can be great for helping you create what we call a team covenant. So a way that everybody gets agreement. Okay, we're going to act like this. These are our norms. This is what we're going to expect of each other. These can be a great way to do that. I have been like a traveling salesman talking to people about this because I just think it's that important. And so let me tell you what I have for you at the end, and then I'll close and take questions from Mary. So on your tables, you've got this little poster here. And I do talk a great deal to executives about the importance of messages and probably now more than ever, messaging, conversations, moments where we speak to people, we have to plan, prepare, and practice. We can't just show up and, I'm a great speaker, I'll just show up and boom. No. You have to plan, prepare, practice. So on the front and back of this are just some things that we talk about that have to be in place. And it says up here at the top, you are the message. I believe that so strongly with our leaders. You are the message. So how you plan your message, how you create the message for your team. So some things to make sure you're looking at. What is the right channel for conveying your message? How do people receive and interpret a message best? So these are some tools that you can use. And then just feedback. Sometimes that you need that from others. And then I've got my contact information down here because I just love connecting with people. So if you're out there on LinkedIn and want to connect, please reach out to me, especially our virtual audience, those of you who can't be here but are listening, reach out on LinkedIn. And I will just say, again, thank you to Lynn and to Travis for asking me to be here. I have sincerely enjoyed getting to share a message with you and just encourage us as we can to use these practical methods for applying ideas and working towards improving the levels of trust that we have within our organization. So I'll close there. Thank you all so much.